I've been writing webcomics for a few years now, and a lot of my opinions on technical aspects of the craft are in constant flux. Sometimes I'm a fan of outlining and structure, and other times I think it's creatively stifling. I flip-flop between the appropriate amount of text to include, how closely comics relate to film, and just other tedious bits of BS, honestly. But regardless of my uncertainty of these concepts, I do have some advice that really has never stopped applying. Whether or not I knew that it always was applying, that's another story. But yeah, let's get into some of my writing tips. Top 5 tips, actually. Number 1, start. This is the pinnacle of writing tips, and it really can't be understated. Until you actually sit down and write a webcomic, you don't even really know what questions you have. You don't know what you suck at the most and need to improve on, and you don't know what you're great at and need to foster and nurture. Start with an idea and run with it. Just see where it takes you. And try your hardest to finish it, though it isn't really a requirement. While I personally might argue against making your first comic a 1,000-page epic, I mean, as long as you start it, it doesn't matter. When you start, make it public. Does this mean online? No, but it can't really hurt to go online with it. Okay, actually, it really hurts to go online with it, like a lot, but it's an important hurt. The point of making a webcomic is to get yourself out there. And like other aspects of webcomicking, being out in the public is a skill. You need to practice it just as much as you need to practice perspective and proportions. Number 2, be terrible. Once you start a webcomic, I hereby give you permission to be terrible. Your first project will suck, and it'll suck hard. Anything you think you're good at, you're not. And that's okay, because sucking is the first step at being good at anything. When you start getting the feeling that you're good at something, well, find something you're terrible at. Improve on that skill. Go back to the thing you thought you excelled at and realized that you still suck at that too. When you're comfortable, you stop engaging with your work. You plateau, you don't learn anything. Always be seeking out new things to suck at. With that being said, I'm going to caveat that. Don't do this at the expense of your self-esteem. All the terrible bits of art, those aren't you. They're just fun new adventures. Instead of valuing your art on how good it is currently, value your effort, your dedication, and your improvement. These are the things that you can control. These are your accomplishments, not your natural sense of color or your instinctive eye for composition. That shitty first attempt at linear perspective, that shitty plot you wrote, but finished for the first time, these are the things that you should value, because it's okay to suck, and these are the real accomplishments. Number 3, listen and learn. I often forget this advice myself, because it starts to get tricky the more you improve and the more you start getting conflicting, contradictory information. But I would be remiss to neglect this point. Listen to everyone. Even your harshest, stupidest critics have something to say. The worst, the most wonderful, and terrible thing about posting your webcomic is seeing people comment on it, write reviews for it, and bad-mouth it on forums. Remember that all criticism is both right and wrong. Whatever anyone says about your comics, it's right for them. It's an opinion. It's subjective. It's your job to look at criticism and apply it to your work. See if what's said rings true for you and your intention. I'd avoid taking advice on how to fix your work from your public, because this is your own personal work, but keep an eye out for what issues people are having. Are they confused by a panel? Did you fail to make it clear that your characters are doing more than just a hug? Or did you create a confusing mess of a plot that can't be interpreted without a 1,500 word synopsis? Not that anyone here has done any of that. But having eyes on your story is so invaluable, so just put them to good use. Number 4, write other things. I know writing comics is fun. You don't have to write prose when you write comics, and as someone who was once very prose-averse, well, I can see the allure, trust me. But you need to write other things. Not forever, of course. You don't need to become a novelist just to be a webcomicer. But until you actually attempt writing other things, you won't know if you hate them or not anyways. And much like in my point about sucking, sometimes it's good to do things you're terrible at. There are many, 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 many advantages to experimenting with different writing mediums. The first is that it allows you to complete things. Until you finish your comic entirely, it's often hard to get eyes on your work. Script reading is difficult for some people, and since comics are visual, a lot of your storytelling is lost before it's finished. Since you'll most likely be updating your comic long before it's finished, it's hard to get eyes on your storytelling as a whole. Writing things like novels, short stories, short comics, etc., are great ways to get people to look at your work and judge it. There are also numerous ways that these skills can apply to your comics, but that's a whole other video. I could get into all of that. And let's not forget about the joy of writing nonfiction, poetry, and copy. These are wonderful additions to your understanding of writing. Comics are a lot like poetry. Nonfiction teaches you the values of clarity, the purpose of language, and how to construct the argument of a scene. And copy, well, copy will help you make that money you want. I'm assuming you might want some money and popularity if you have a comic, so copy writing is good. Number 5, be interesting. Finally, and most importantly, be interesting, be interested. It's easy to get wrapped up in your own comics, art, and writing to the point where you're a hermit living in a cave of your own work. But aside from it being damaging to your mental health, it's damaging to your art. I'm a firm believer in the idea that we write what we know. Fantasy comes as an extension of reality. Tolkien wrote the... Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I'm having a serious stutter problem on the author of Lord of the Rings. I literally can't say it. But that guy. He wrote The Lord of the Rings from a passion for lore and linguistics. Many horror is written as a personification of mental illness and the struggles of the author. My personal work spans many topics of interest, including, but not limited to, cat genetics, Northern Ontario small-town life, snow, being gay, North American wildlife, existential dread, depression, fear of abandonment, crows, knitting, the list goes on and on and on and on. Leaving the house, meeting people, doing things that interest you will give you a deep understanding of a topic. It's often these little moments that add realness to your work. Pay attention to the situations you get yourself into. How do people talk where you're traveling to? How would you describe the smell of a bus stop? The feeling of looking at pictures of tigers is a lot different than standing next to one on the opposite side of a fence that feels too thin to hold one back. As you go through life and collect this library of experiences, you can pull on them and interpret them visually. Your worlds become richer and you have more that you want to say. You'll find purpose in your work and feelings you need to express. And that's really my top advice. Thanks so much for watching. Go now, you guys, and study, explore, and make wonderful, terrible, terrible art. Love you guys. Bye.